I'm Sean Halsall, and this is What's Left. Hi everyone, welcome to What's Left. Tonight I'm joined by Laura, one of our co-hosts. Hi Laura.
Hi Sean.
And we are joined by Shanell Johnson, who was a candidate in Leighton and Wanstead and is an independent councillor in, what borough is it again, Shanell?
In Redbridge.
Redbridge, excellent. So how are you doing, mate?
I'm good. Nice to see you both.
You too, mate, you too.
So,
for all listeners who don't know, me and Shanell were both on the same sort of slate, if you like, of independent candidates across the country, supported by the collective. So that's how I know Shanell. And yeah, so she come to us this evening to talk about her experience during the general election and more. Mm-hmm. So how did you find it, Shanell, the sort of standing as an independent? Because you were Labour, weren't you, as well?
Yeah. So I started life as a Labour councillor. And I think I was of the batch of the intake that was inspired and motivated when Jeremy Corbyn came to the forefront. And it just, do you know, I think for me it was the great leveller was the £3 that you could pay to be part of the system, and I'm like, yep, putting it in. I'm gonna cast my vote. I think that was a game changer for a lot of people because they felt that it could be something that they could have a say in at a price point that everybody could afford.
So. And obviously generated absolute fortunes for the party at that point, which was I understand it, struggling financially.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all because you had so many students that were coming forward from every part of the country that were giving their £3 to be part of what they saw was their future. So if you look at the slate that he ran on and the slate that we have now, you would say that they're kind of miles apart. So, you know, that the interest that Jeremy Corbyn, that is, was able to generate by just setting out a standpoint that everybody could be part of a democratic process. And we're just not seeing the same thing now. We're not. I don't think we are.
So what do you think the biggest differences between sort of back then? Because I myself was elected in 2019 as well. So sort of the 6 months or so before the general election where it all got taken away from us. But yeah, so what's some of your sort of thoughts on the difference between that version of the party and this?
So just the basic standard stuff, in the sense where I didn't think in my lifetime I would see any Labour politician be whipped for voting. Sorry, it still makes me laugh because I'm just like, is this actually happening? You know, would be whipped to say, we don't want there to be child poverty. We want children to have a benefit. They weren't chosen to be born, you know. So I didn't ever. I mean, I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it's unbelievable. So it's like, that's Labour.
Mm-hmm. It's completely obscene. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the many things that sort of tipped me over the edge into leaving myself. The two-child benefit cap, Gaza, I mean, a complete lack of commitment to improving workers' rights properly. It was sort of messing around the edges. I think, yeah, it made it sort of impossible. Almost everything I believed in and got involved in politics for was sort of taken away from us slowly, bit by bit. And yeah, I think it's interesting as well now to see, and we're going to come on to this later, but to see where the party is at now and sort of everyone being outraged when anyone on the inside of this could have seen this coming a mile away. It's exactly how they behaved with the internal sort of party. Yeah.
But you look, I mean, look, the vulnerable people in society, children that don't have a voice and can't vote. Yeah, they're being impacted by policies that have come about and votes that are being taken. And then you've got the poorest people kind of worried and anxious about whether they can go out and protest, because that is also something that's being taken away. I mean, I can't give Keir Starmer completely the credit for that. But I mean, you've just seen the convictions that have happened with the people that are protesting for climate change. Like, really? You know, they're raising the flag on things that we should be taking more note of. And they're being handed very heavy prison sentences for protesting. You know, women's liberation and the rights to vote was won from protest. Why are we taking that away from people? It just doesn't make sense to me. And then in terms of taking away the winter fuel allowance just before we hit winter. I mean, these are just three small examples that I didn't think we would see a Labour government really push. I thought they would have gone in harder on non-domicile, like tax evasion, things like that, where those are the things where the people with the bigger shoulders are avoiding paying their dues. I thought that's what I would have seen, but I haven't. So big difference.
Absolutely. So what was it that sort of drew you into politics, Shanell? What was your starting point?
I think I was in it accidentally. So I was quite young when I got involved in politics, but didn't realize I was involved in politics. And when I look back now in hindsight, I think I was way more privileged and I had way more than I thought I had, but was complaining about stuff I didn't have. And we were a youth centre. I was 13, and we'd had loads of European social funding to build our youth centre and kit it out. And they were asking us what we wanted, but you had adults, instead of really asking us, they was like, oh no, we'll get them this and we'll get them that. They'll like this and they'll like that. And we was 13. It was like, no, we want a table tennis table. And our youth worker got furious with us. He was like, you lot are just complaining all the time. You know, why don't you just stop complaining and do something? And we were sat there like stunned to silence. Well, what can we do? What can we do? And he gave us the idea of starting up a newsletter for young people. And that newsletter was so well received. And it was called Just Us. And we wrote about the things that mattered to us as young people. We wrote about the environment. We wrote about housing. Ironically, some of the things that we were writing about back then are no different from the insecurities that people face now, if not, they're worse. So we were then sharing stories and sharing poetry. And this newsletter went on to then become our youth parliament. Because we then wanted to get representation across the whole of the area where we lived. We would go and hold meetings. We had no idea that we were even political. We just felt it's important to have a shared space. And I think that is what grounded me in politics, in the sense of having a shared space and giving people equal talking time. And that's always something that I grew up with. So I saw that as normal. So going through the political mill 25, nearly 30 years later, and seeing a completely different thing when I felt that my structure at 13 was fairer than what I see today.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Like you're saying, sort of that newsletter, giving a voice to people and being able to get their ideas, their opinions out. And like you say now, with the sort of current political structure that we've got in place, we're seeing more people silenced than have been for a long time. Yes. Like you say, with the erosion of protest rights and things like that, it's just silencing people and browbeating them to the point where they're too scared to stand up and say anything.
The fear is real. It's very, very real. And I think the apathy has become a result of that, because by virtue of people not engaging in the political system, what you then see is that a minority of people then get the power. And I think this is what has happened and what is going to continue to happen. So they just need to find just that core of people that are going to vote for them, and they don't care about the mass. And by virtue of doing that, it means that fewer and fewer people engage in the system because they don't believe, one, that it's for them. They don't believe that, two, they can change anything. And three, they're just the fear. It's like, well, what's the point in me spending this energy to try to move something forward or try to change the status quo when I'm going to get knocked back. I'm going to get knocked back, or I don't want to be seen to rock the boat. I mean, if people were more like the French, where actually, no, we are going to go out and protest, and actually, no, we are going to refuse to work. If we did that en masse, I don't think we would see what we're seeing happening today, because people would get out and go, well, actually, you know what? My voice does count. My feet count. I'm going to show you how I feel with my feet. I'm going to withdraw my labor, and I'm not going to take part in what's going on. So, I don't know where we're going, and it does scare me sometimes.
I think, though, I mean, as sort of full of desperation it feels at the moment, I think in times like this comes opportunity as well, and the opportunity now to build something outside of Labour on the left in politics that actually represents people. I think, I mean, as was said at the meeting at the weekend, like there's very few times there's opportunities like this, and the Labour Party have sort of retreated from being the legitimate voice of working people and the trade union movement. I think it's only so long before the trade union movement retreat from them, because there's very little sort of benefit in supporting a party that wants to freeze your nan and starve your kids. It doesn't feel like that's a party that represents us as workers. But I think it'd be interesting to hear about your experiences in the general election, sort of how your campaign was built and worked and that sort of stuff. So yeah, what was it like campaigning down there?
Yeah, so my campaign, I didn't even know I was going to run until I ran. So it wasn't premeditated. It was more the fact that my local MP, who I actually did have a lot of time for, John Cryer. So he was trade union through and through, very rooted in the trade union movement. But in the last sort of 5 years, we've seen his just not the passion for it. Like there's been a lot that's meant that he's not been as front facing with the community. But I wouldn't have stood against him. And then he decided that he was going to stand down, at which point I was sat on my sofa and I'd got the resignation note, and I had about 3 or 4 phone calls. I was like, yes, I've just seen it. Yes, I've just seen it. Yes, I've just seen it. And one of my friends rang, and I said to him, if what do you reckon? Do you reckon I should go for it? And he said, if you do, I'll be your agent. I said, all right. And he went, is that all right? All right, as in, all right, you're going to do it? And I was like, yeah, all right. Trying to convince myself.
Talking yourself into it as you're signing the paper.
Yeah, all right. So then I went for it. And then that same night, I rang around, spoke to some people that I knew that could help me with the social media side of things, roped in friends and family, and then just went for it. And I knew that it was going to be like 35, 40 days of complete insanity, because that's all I had. I didn't have like a long run up to it. And I had no idea how I was going to get any money. None of this was thought through. There was no sort of like prior thinking about this is how it's going to work. There was none of that, So anyone that said yes, they would help me, literally got given a task to do that minute. And this people that I hadn't even met, like they would ring me up because I put my number out on everything, which probably isn't the wisest thing to do. like your number, your address, like your email, like everyone's got it now, and you suddenly start getting inundated. Some of the messages weren't pleasant. Some of the social media wasn't pleasant. Some of it was like not pleasant, based on being a woman, being black, just the site, that kind of stuff that you kind of think, oh, you got to have tougher skin for this, put on your rhino suit. But that was the bad stuff. The stuff that made me absolutely melt inside was the real pure love. There are strangers that come up to me in the street and that were coming up into the street and were saying thank you. There was people that were bringing their grandparents out to come and meet me, and I thought they were just going shopping. They were like, no, they heard that you was in the high street, they come to see you. Me? They're like, yeah, they want your picture. Really? And I didn't go in on a big policy platform. I didn't, because I didn't have time to create one. I didn't have time to create like this big, long manifesto. So people that knew me and knew that I'd left Labour and knew that the catalogue of reasons why I'd left the party, they were genuinely interested in seeing if I was upholding those same values, which you can't not hold those values up if you've already said that that's why you have moved away from something. So if you've moved away from something for these set reasons, then the thing that makes you different is that you are not doing the same as what you said you're moving away from. And I think that also resonated. And then also encouraging people to join the assembly model, which again, a lot of people had never heard of it. So most conversations were spent around explaining that we would have regular meetings. We would talk about the issues. We know the issues that are impacting our community. Therefore, we're the ones that are better placed to solve them because we're experiencing them. And that was such a simple message that people went, oh, that's an interesting way of doing it.
Mm.
And,
yes.
There was a lot.
Go on, Sean.
There was a lot of people that got behind the idea of running the assembly model. There was a lot of people that got behind the idea of just having the opportunity to have a space and knowing that we could set up a space where they could come and speak, and not just speak, but be listened to. Mm-hmm. And that was what I felt was the main difference. And there was a lot of people that were saying to me, we didn't have a choice. We didn't think that we had a choice until we met you, or we didn't realize what it meant to be an independent and the fact that you're going to stand up for the area. We didn't know what that is, so thank you for getting that message out there to us. So it was really really quite humbling, to be fair. I think I came away from that experience knowing a lot more about the things that were happening in the community. Even though I thought I knew a lot, that was when I realized that I only scratched the surface, and I live here. So I'm thinking, if I'm only scratching the surface, then the people that are parachuting in, how much do they know, and how much can they get to know, in the same space of time that I had. So, but very humbling, very humbling.
Yeah, I was gonna just say that I did the assemblies as well myself, and I was a bit tentative going into it because it's kind of like, oh, how's this going to go? What's going to come out of here? But it was incredibly inspiring to see just sort of socialist principles come through when you get communities together, no matter if they see themselves as socialists or not. It was, sort of the least progressive policy that came out would have been to the left of anything the 2017 Labour manifesto of my assemblies. And it was not like a stacked crowd. We had, it was a broad sort of representative group from the community there. It's just interesting to see how when people have got the space to talk through these policies and ideas, that they do tend to come out with sort of very community focused progressive ideas. And it's sold it to me. I think that is the model we need to look at with building stuff outside of mainstream politics and empowering, giving power back to the community, letting them make decisions. And yeah, we can talk to them, advise them on maybe that's not the best idea to do this absolutely wild thing that would maybe impact people. Have you thought about this instead? And but I think, yeah, the communities themselves coming up with these ideas is ultimately super powerful, and it empowers people. What better way to show people that being engaged in politics matters than giving them the reins of power and including them in the decision-making process and empowering our communities again.
I think that's one thing that I think that's one thing that really did come out of the assemblies, is it's important to give people a chance to speak, to say what their concerns are, and to say what would directly impact them. Because when we get these communities together, a lot of the concerns are the same. A lot of the worries and their hopes and aspirations for themselves, their families, and the places that they live are the same. And it's people don't usually get an opportunity to speak about that, maybe with groups outside of their own friends and family. So coming together with a group of people who you might think you've got nothing in common with, but this community from within the constituency or the town, wherever it might be, all getting together to discuss political ideas and ideas about their life and hopes, aspirations, and, you know, coming out with these policies and ideas that they would like to take forward. I think it's really important. And like you mentioned, Shanell, when people are brought in from the outside, parachuted into constituencies, they've no idea about these issues, about what affect real people within those areas. But the people that do are the people that live there. And it's important giving them a voice through this assembly model.
And this is what I saw firsthand when I had people sat together that would never, like, despite the fact that we live in the same area, we won't cross paths. I mean, this constituency's got over 70,000 voters, so it's big. So what are the chances that these people are going to be sat in the same room? So you would then have them sat in the same room, and from complete different class, different walks of life, different experiences, coming up with the same principles. And that for me was the real leveler. You know, you had everybody talking about wanting peace. There was nobody in the room that said that we should be spending more on arms. There was nobody in the room that said we spending more on defense. It was like, no, we can't do that. We can't do both. You can't prepare for war and prepare for peace at the same time, because your mindset can't be split like that. And it's just interesting to then have that wider debate that we should be at all costs preparing for peace. And that was what was coming through from the conversations that we were having. And then the whole sense around like, how do we take more care of our community? How do we take more ownership? Because our default setting has always been call the council or call the this or call the that, but those calls aren't working anymore, even down to calling the police. You know, like, houses are being burgled, and that used to be something that the police used to come out to. Now they're very rarely even coming out to that, you know. So it's things like that people are saying, well, what can we do as a community? Can we contact each other? Can we talk to each other? Can we set up community groups? And a lot of the people were giving examples from COVID. They were saying, we've done it before. You know, when we had COVID, we were looking out for each other, because within our neighborhoods, we had older people. If you hadn't seen them or hadn't heard from them for a few weeks, you went and you checked. So can we bring that back again? You know, so in the face of a crisis, we did what we did. We did what we do at our core, and we care. And that was what was coming through in the assemblies, going back to some of those basic principles of care and compassion for each other.
Yeah, I think as well, the assembly model, as well as being a space to talk about those ideas, I think also naturally that community will end up coming through them, because people getting together and talking will become friends and will start speaking to each other in the street and looking after each other. And I think for me, that was sort of the perfect antidote, or at least the foundations to the perfect antidote to Thatcher's sort of neoliberal plan and stripping back communities and the old "there's no such thing as society" nonsense that clearly has failed and crashed beasts. I mean, we see our rivers and waterways polluted beyond belief, air quality just terrible, people dying of just bad air quality. We see work that doesn't pay, wages stagnating. We see a complete lack of housing, whether social or private housing being built, the NHS crumbling. I think the list is endless where this project of just capital running everything has failed drastically.
And it's scary because we're sitting and we're watching what was built over a very long time, which was the pride of the UK and things that we exported as our expertise. And you look now at some third world countries that have got a better NHS system than what we have. And it's really quite disheartening, to be honest. And to even think that NHS, which is something that we took so much pride in, might end up in the hands of like private profiteers. So even the fear of getting sick then is like, well, can I afford to be ill? That shouldn't be something that's on someone's mind. The whole point of bringing in the NHS in the first place was because people would come back from war and they said, well, you know what, we should have a universal healthcare system because these people have fought hard for this. And to have something that we've always held with such pride to now be reduced to, well, we're going to break it so badly that we're then going to have to give you something that you're just going to have to agree to because this is the only solution that we're going to offer. That can't be right.
Yeah. The sort of most galling thing about the last couple of weeks for me, I mean, of all the things, I was always not expecting Labour to deliver the most, but I did think funding the NHS was something a Labour government would always do more than the Tories. So to hear that there's no money for the NHS and it's just going to be reform, which is sort of coded language for
privatisation, yeah,
it's so heartbreaking. And I mean, it says to me that Wes Streeting is almost certainly going to lose his seat at the next election. I'd hope, fingers crossed, because it's just, like you said, it's the jewel in the crown, really, especially for working class people in this country. It is the leveler. It means you aren't worrying about getting sick and going to a GP. I mean, if we want a system like the United States, then good luck getting cancer and getting a massive bill along with it your house, like, is where we're heading if this carries on.
Yeah. I mean, we've just committed a lot of money to defence and not the NHS. So, does that mean that we're actually preparing for war? Well, I mean, if you look at where we've put some of the money, it does actually make me think that we aren't trying to help. We're actually trying to create more arms and put more money into fighting and having a war, and we're not preparing for a position of peace.
No, I saw the figures, 700 million a week that we're spending on defence at the moment. Now, bearing in mind the absolute chaos we've just had over the winter fuel payments and the 2-child benefit cap being lifted, that's maybe a month, maybe 5 or 6 weeks worth of that defence money. That's an absolute drop in the ocean. So it's absolutely baffling why we'd be okay with people who are old and vulnerable or young and vulnerable through no choice of their own being just left to the sort of scrap pile whilst we just pump a lot of money into weapons companies that are often private. The money's going to a few individuals with absolutely huge paychecks, sort of. And for a sector that doesn't actually create anything, the whole sector is about destroying things. It doesn't add value to the planet, it just destroys. And you might be, so we'll spend £1 million on this rocket, which could end up taking out a hospital or a school or vital infrastructure somewhere where people need it. It's heartbreaking to see that a Labour government especially would be doing this. But I mean, being inside the belly of the beast, it's probably not much of a surprise now that these sort of people get hawkish. So what was your experience on Redbridge Council? So I know you had the infamous leader who's now an MP for Ilford South, at least at the time of recording. Whether he ends up getting pushed out by then is another story. But
honestly, I mean, I was really upset by what I was seeing in the council when he was leader. So much so that I handed in my resignation under him as the leader, because I wasn't comfortable with what I was seeing. And when I say not comfortable with what I was seeing, I felt that we were sort of told how to vote, and we were told who we should be putting in certain positions. And I thought, well, no, I don't want to be dictated to. I've got to the ripe old age that I am, which I won't say, but I've got to the ripe old age that I am. And my whole life, I've never been dictated to. I'm not about to let it start happening now. Like, I've got my own mind. I can think and see. So why would I let you tell me how I'm supposed to be voting? It was things like that I thought, hang on a minute, this isn't right. But for me, there was a catalogue of things. It wasn't just one or two things. There was so many things. I'd had a few things that were race related that I wanted to raise. Now, if you go to any other employer and you say, look, I've got a race related incident, I really want to talk to somebody about it, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, like, come in, we'll sort it out. Let's know what happened. You don't wait 6 months. So it was things like that, when it suits the status quo, you're put on a pedestal. When they want to farm you out and say, oh, look, this is our first ever councillor of West Indian heritage, our Windrush generation, person, me. They want you there to wave the flag for the 75 years of Windrush, but then for the rest of the time that you're in the council, you don't get to speak or raise the questions or queries or concerns for people's issues that are impacting, that have come from that generation. I didn't like that. I thought that wasn't fair, because there was questions I wanted to ask about like warm banks or safety for women. There were so many things that I would try and ask, and they wouldn't even let me put it on the agenda. Not the agenda at the council. I'm talking about our private Labour agenda. I had no voice. So when I stepped away, like, my friend was like, but you're never going to have a voice now. I went, well, I'd rather have a voice but keep my integrity intact.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when I went independent, it was literally like a weight had lifted from my shoulders. I just was like, because I'm all right with me. And I think the thing that I felt that was most central and core, I know what my values are. I know what I stand for, and they're not about to suddenly change. And I'm not about to suddenly flip flop or, put the things that I believe to one side just because I'm a Labour councillor. No, it can't work, because if anything, I'm probably more Labour, 1950s Labour, than what I was seeing happening in the chamber. And I believe in democracy. I came through a youth council movement where we encouraged people to talk up. We encouraged people to stand up for their democratic rights, because our ancestors had fought too hard for them. So why would you just now sit around the council chamber and give away your right to vote? I don't think so.
Yeah, just for listeners who might not be fully aware of how the whipping system works in council chamber, and then the group sort of stuff, the political party grouping. You're not supposed to be whipped or told how to vote in them group settings. That should be your ability to express your opinion. And that's where the whips forms, the positions on certain motions and positions there. So in them group, it's meant to be free. You're not meant to be told how you vote. Yeah, where Shanell was raising there, it isn't, well, because often people would just see the frontline stuff where people are whipped, and I understand why they are. I understand the need for discipline, but also, if you're going to have discipline there needs to be the ability to debate behind closed doors, and if that's taken away from you, then there is no democracy. It becomes dictatorship, doesn't it, very quickly?
Yeah, and that's what I saw, and it happened. I mean, this is where I realized how naive I really was, because I didn't know what was happening behind the closed doors. And once that was unveiled, I think I was actually shocked to my core, because I couldn't have even imagined it was that bad. Like, there is no way I would have imagined it was that bad.
Mm-hmm.
And stunned, shocked, in total disarray, I was like, what is this?
Yeah, I think from my own personal experience, just with the party and the party structures and things, because I'd been a member for a very long time, but not been involved, within the party structures, if you like, and within local constituency politics. And when I first sort of saw what was going on, I was really shocked that the people that were making decisions or raising motions that were affecting our local communities, and held some sort of say and sway over what went on, were behaving like worse than children that you would see at school. Everybody likes an impassioned debate, but to me, if we're going to have a debate about something, you should be allowed to put your point across, and then equally, I'll be allowed to put my point across. And seeing in meetings the just beating down of people so that they don't speak up, suppressing people's ideas, and just like bullying that was going on, like wild things that you think in these institutions that are, integral parts of our communities, societies, in the decisions that go on, that affect all of our daily lives and where we live, are being made by these people that conduct themselves in such a horrendous way. And it was really shocking for me and eye-opening to see, the disarray that was going on within these structures. People in these positions are in positions of power, and they're abusing them, and most people don't know that that's going on. And they're abusing the people that they're also meant to be working alongside.
Yeah, it's to me that silencing and that taking away the voice was why I had to move away. I thought, you know what, if I'm going to spend the next 2 years sitting in the chamber but still not get a say, I'd rather sit in the chamber as an independent and not have a say than to sit in the chamber and show people that I'm part of what they're doing, because I'm not. It doesn't align with me. It doesn't sit right with me. I don't think people should be treated with that much contempt, and it hurt me to my core. There were some people that come to the chamber to raise their views and their points, and they were being silenced and being told, it's been raised in the last 6 months, you can't raise it again, or, that question's not permitted. It was just, it's a mockery, because the leader can stand there and say, oh, yes, by all means, come to the chamber, have your voices heard. But behind the scenes, you put in to get your voice heard, or you raise a question that they don't want to answer, you suddenly won't have your voice heard. And it even happened yesterday. I mean, we was in a council meeting yesterday, and I'm sat there and I'm like, here we go again. People being silenced, the community wanting to come and talk, and wanting specifically to ask the question around what's going on and what the council were doing in relation to the allegations that have been made against Jazz. The question was not permitted to be tabled.
And that's to me was completely wild, where he's talking about not avoiding a conflict of interests by, I can't remember why he brought that up, but yet not recognizing that being the leader of a council and being a slum landlord, a council which would be a conflict of interest.
Yeah, so the conflict of interest was that he would not have tenants that were on benefits.
That was it. Yeah.
So I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you? It just I didn't know anything about this. I was reading it in the paper for the first time myself. And do you know what? I said, this is shocking, but it's not surprising. And I say it's not surprising, not because what I'd seen and how I'd understood him as a person and the way that he operated and what I had personally experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So I just said, this is shocking, and anybody that's reading this should just be like, this needs to stop. But for me personally, I said it's not surprising. Very, very disappointing. Because even down to the licensing, because that was one of the allegations that's made, is that the licensing that he bought into the area, his own properties didn't actually have correct licensing. So these are the allegations that all came out, So you think, well, you as leader signed that through. and are calling out slum landlords and are saying that, you know, you want to make sure that this licensing policy that's gone through means that you don't have people that are slum landlords, but yet you yourself haven't even signed up to your own scheme. I mean, it's just you create the rule, then you don't follow it. You know, you're as bad as Boris Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, I think even worse because Labour politicians hide behind the banner. They'll all call themselves socialists. It's very rare you'll cross paths with socialists in the Labour Party, to be honest, especially nowadays.
Well, these days, yeah.
But I mean, bad enough to be leading a council, but now he's in the Houses of Parliament voting on legislation that will affect all our lives. The guy's clearly got no morals at all to be able to have humans living in them conditions and exploiting some of the most marginalized people in society like that. And then we see the sort of stuff around tax not being paid on children's care centres or something. The last couple of days has come out as well. You just wonder what's coming next. It's wild to see that these, and it doesn't surprise me again, like yourself. I think we're going to see a lot more of these because clearly the Labour Party, when they were doing their due diligence, weren't focused on that wing of the party and have let probably a few embarrassments through. It's
I mean, it's again, if you just look at it in the whole, okay, it's capitalism at its worst. You know, you look at immediately, Keir Starmer came in and Sir Keir straight away hit children, you know, and hit old people, the people in society that are the most vulnerable, that are least likely to be able to speak out against what's happening. And now let's just take Mr. Ratwell, for example. Now the same again, you know, people that are very vulnerable, that are unlikely to, you know, want to rock the boat because they want to keep the roof over their heads. You know, and that level of intimidation, the journalist from the BBC unfolded, it really hurt when I heard, like, when he is explaining it. It's not even them explaining it, but yet you could feel the pain and of what he had described. And I watched the video clip on the BBC and I was just taken aback. I was like, wow, this is really something. And then you've got the other end of the extreme, children again. Can't say anything, can't do anything. The most vulnerable people in society that we're supposed to be taking care of. So if you're seeing it in the main and you're seeing that the leader of the party is doing it, what do you expect the minions to do?
I think this is what is so abhorrent about the things that are going on at the moment, is that time and time again we're seeing the most vulnerable in society, whether that be the elderly, children, disabled, people who are on benefits, people who are at the fringes of society,
Exactly.
are being the ones that are being the worst treated. They're being the ones that are told, oh, you've got to pull up your bootstraps, you've got to tighten your belt, shoulder these changes, shoulder this, what is, you know, essentially austerity that we're having again. And it's these people that are being, like you say, being taken advantage of. You're in a position where your landlord is keeping you in a home that is unsafe, that is unfit for human habitation. But what are you going to do? Where else are you going to go if they say, it's all right then, here you go, off you pop? There's nowhere for people to go. There's nothing that people feel that they can do because they are in such a vulnerable position. And I think it's absolutely disgusting that, you know, as a party, like we've said that before, we would put with values that are the same as ours, that people should be looked after, you know, socialist values, that we should be taking care of people in society, particularly the most vulnerable, are the ones that are allowing these changes and these actions to take place. It's really, really disheartening and harrowing, really, for the people in those situations.
And for these to be their first actions, you know, it's like day zero. This is what they've started with. I think that's the thing that probably surprised me the most, because I thought, well, day zero, they're going to go in and they're going to go in on non-dommies style and make sure they sort out the tax loopholes. That's what I actually thought day zero might have looked like. I didn't think day zero was going to be whipping people if they voted against the they voted for the child to stop the child benefit cuts.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I didn't expect that. I didn't. I mean, that maybe that's me being naive, but I actually thought that day zero would be a tax of some kind on wealth.
Yeah. I don't think it's being naive at all. I think it's being hopeful and optimistic, that particularly when you've been a part of the party previously and, you know, seen what's gone on, you know, people within the party and people who, again, have similar values and hopes for people, for the country that you have. And not all of them have been removed. You know, some of the people that we sat alongside before are still within those party structures. And I think it's that hope that, oh, actually, maybe, you know, some of the policies that have been coming out have been to appease a certain sector of voters. Maybe once the parties within power, that real change that will really help the people who need it the most will take hold and will be actioned. And I really don't think it's naivety. I think it's hope. And I think that's the thing that we're all trying to cling on to at the moment. You know, that we can do something, we can affect some change, that there is a need and a hope and optimism within people in our communities that things can be different and things can be better for people, particularly those people that need it the most.
Yeah. And I think it's funny because I think where the hope sits for me now is with the independent voices. And rather than doing things that are just global or huge or for the country as a whole, we do need to look at what individual communities need. And this is where the independent movement, I think, has that opportunity to be that local voice. Because the issues that are in your area versus the issues that are down here in London maybe are similar, but are not the same. You know, so where you have the independent movement and you are actually having assemblies and talking to the local communities, you can drive that forward and you can vote by the interests of the people, not the interests of the party. And that's where I now put my hope. I put my hope in people politics, not politics, party politics. And I didn't think I would come to that, especially not so quickly. I didn't think that I would be like less than 10 years in Labour and go, this isn't going to work. I didn't think that at all. And like I was saying earlier, my sort of rise into politics was purely accidental. You know, it wasn't, I didn't think I was even being political. I just thought I was being fair. Okay, let's have a debate. Let's have a conversation. You know, I was that 13-year-old that was chairing the meetings and, you know, thought that it was important that everybody should talk, you know, and literally pointing people out. I mean, I look back thinking I must have scared people because they'd sit in the room for me and they'll be like, she's going to ask me in a minute, any minute now. I'm like, yep, I haven't heard from you. You need to say something. But that's what is empowering people and giving people the chance to have their voices heard. So it really is. And that's where the independent movement needs to sit. It needs to be power back in the hands of the people.
Yeah, I think it's interesting you say, you know, you didn't realize that you were doing politics, because I think that's true for a lot of people. A lot of people will tell you that they're not engaged politically or they're not interested in politics, but they'll have a 45-minute discussion with you about your children's A&E that's not open anymore in the local hospital, or the fact that their grandparent maybe can't get a place in a local nursing home, or the staff there are, you know, completely overworked and underpaid. And I think you know, again, people within the community that, like you mentioned, in COVID were doing community initiatives, like where I lived in Haydock, we had people who were making meals up en masse for people and just saying, if you need something on this day, these meals will be, just come and collect them from the doorstep, you know. And all these people are doing politics. Exactly. And I think that's what's important with the assemblies, is bringing that back into the community and letting people recognize that they're already doing this political stuff. They're already engaged in community politics. They just probably don't label it as such. And I think alongside the independent and assembly movement, we can really get that recognition within the communities with these people that are already doing this work. They're already involved and integrated within their communities and have a community around them and doing a lot of that work, that we can bring that into those assemblies and hopefully get that distributed more and getting more people engaged, seeing what their neighbours and, you know, their neighbours are doing alongside them and getting involved.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the ways that we're going to start to challenge fascism, because if we're actually able to have these conversations and realize that there's more that unites us than what divides us, because our issues are very, very similar, but we've been encouraged so much to blame the other that you end up having this really, really strange debate when the other person that you're supposed to be blaming is sat next to you and they're going, yeah, I can't afford a pint of milk either, mate. Yeah. Like our plight is so similar, you know, like they don't always get to see or hear from each other. So you don't get to break down the barriers, and then the media gets to capitalize on the fact that you don't break down those barriers, and we can just tell you that, you know, like, I've stolen all the cheese, but you need to fight over the crumbs. And you know, go and have a look over there, like the sort of the diversion tactic to blame someone else for the situation that you're in, when in actual fact, those people that you're blaming are sometimes in a far worse situation than you're actually in anyway. But you won't know that because you're never encouraged to talk to them.
Absolutely. I think for me, we're at like a 1900 moment where Keir Hardie and a bunch of other trade unionists came together and decided politics doesn't represent us. We need something of our own. It's not good enough that we just get into the Liberal Party and take seats. That's not going to be good enough anymore. And formed the, at the time, Labour Representation Committee. I feel like we're back there. There's the Labour Party's moved so far away. It does not represent working class people anymore in this country. And these working class is anyone who has to either sell the labour or doesn't own capital.
Yes.
And I think we need, the local aspect is super important. But I think we do need an overarching party to bring it together, to have that identity, to do the national stuff, to get people. Because unfortunately, the odds are just stacked against us without having a party and being able to access the sort of platforms you get.
The support networks. Yeah, the support networks.
Just the backroom stuff where you hold your data, all that sort of stuff. Having good social media, because whether we like it or not, social media is much bigger part now. You see Nigel Farage, what he's just done without a minute's actual campaigning, just social media stuff, and come second in so many seats, and it's worrying. And if we don't have a party to the left of Labour that fills that space, the far right will capitalise on that and will sell working class people a pup. And
they already have. Sean, they already have. I mean, you just got to look at what happened in the Brexit elections. You know, they already have capitalized on social media so far down the line that, you know, they're able to get into people's phones and get into their minds and their thinking and sort of point to them and say, you know, this is what's filling the gap and this is what you need to do. And just with sort of simple slogans, simple messaging, they're already getting there and they're creating hate. And I don't have all the answers to break down that hate, but there's got to be a talking piece that means that, you know, yeah, you might think I'm different from you. I might think you're different from me, but actually we've got a lot in common, you know, not just the area that we live in, but our day to day is not so dissimilar. And people need to start to see that, you know, and it's not to then create another layer of, okay, well, we should all hate the government. No, it's not to create that layer. It's simply to say, actually, we've got more in common. Shall we help each other? You know, shall we do something together? You know, our children go to the same school, or there's something more, but it's finding that common ground that we can start from. And because we're encouraged to be distrustful of each other, we're encouraged to fear each other, we're encouraged to other each other, you know, and this is where I think that the problem has has been able to be even bigger. Because if we don't feel like we can trust and believe in humanity, then what else is there?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's although it does look like we're full of despair at the moment, I think there is a lot to be hopeful for. Often out of these times of sort of peril comes hope and comes a proper change that will deliver good things for people up and down the country, hopefully. Because although, yeah, our communities will be very different with very different needs, I think the overarching problems are the same. It comes from people filling the corridors of power in Westminster who have absolutely no grounding in the real world. They don't understand what
They don't
struggle is.
represent them. Don't represent them.
And yeah, I mean, all the things we spoke about, assemblies and having good locally community-rooted candidates, it's so important for us shifting the balance. And it can't be a short-term thing. We can't think if we don't get power in the next election, that's it, it's over. It's got to be a long-term plan, because unfortunately our message is a little bit more complicated than the far right's. I think often actually addressing real issues is more complicated than, look at that person there, they look a bit brown, blame them.
Yeah.
I think actually breaking down, and we've got decades and decades of the media filling people's heads full of rubbish and education systems that don't politically educate people. I mean,
it's not in their interest to politically educate people. It's in their interest to keep people down to 3 slogan words that they're going to then take action on.
Yeah.
Because if they truly understood the complexities of what they're being presented with and the logic behind it, there is no way that they would be doing the very thing that is not even in their own interests. They just wouldn't do it.
No, absolutely not. And yeah, power will cling on to power. The establishment will cling on to power for as long as it can, and we've got to be the ones there to get in our communities, politically educate people, let them know how we change this. And yeah, it's going to be a long battle, but I think we'll be worth it in the end, because we will achieve this. It's either that or the planet burns because fossil fuel giants are allowed to get away with what they're doing. We're all choke on the smoke that's being pumped out.
And we'll have private NHS and we won't be able to afford our bills, and we'll all start dying at 45. I thought you said you wasn't going to end this on despair, Sean.
I was just thinking, I just thought that was going to go that way and that we would have a nice, hopeful moment to end upon. But I think, as we've all said, that out of these times comes a real message and feeling of optimism and of hope. That out of the absolute despair that, you know, we can feel and that people are feeling when they're in such suffering, and, you know, a lot of people in abject poverty and just feel like they're being time and time again, like that boot is just pushing further down on them. But in those darkest moments, I think collectively knowing that there are other people that feel the same as you, that want a better life, that know that a better society and a better model of society is possible, and it is out there, and it's doable, because it's in the hands of everybody, for everybody to stand up, be counted, make a change. And I think that hope really does come out of these horrific situations. And I think that might be a more optimistic note that we could end on, because it's been really interesting talking to you, Shanell, about your experience, you know, and how you came through and got involved in politics. It's
and
funny.
I still am involved, which means I must have some hope there somehow, right?
Exactly. Still fighting for that change, because it will come.
It will. It has to.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So if anyone watching, if you want to support us, it's coming up now, patreon.com/what's left radio, and give us a follow on X/Twitter at what's left radio. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, Shanell, and we'll see you soon, comrade.
Thank you so much,
guys.
Thanks,
Take care. See you.